Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our first town hall of this semester. Today's town hall is geared specifically towards faculty and staff. The town hall is sponsored by Penn State Today, and it's part of our ongoing effort to provide faculty, staff with an opportunity to hear leadership's thoughts, discuss ideas, ask questions, and have an input. We have received a number of questions ahead of time, and you can send questions in right now because this is a live event. It is also being streamed to all of our campuses. You can email questions to us at questions@psu.edu. You can also tweet them to us at the hashtag PSUstrong. And if you're here in the physical audience, you can hand questions to the people that are walking around to collect them, and all of your questions will be anonymous. Before we start those questions, I'd like to introduce Nick Jones and David Gray. Nick Jones serves as our Executive Vice President and Provost here at Penn State. As our Chief Academic Officer, he's been instrumental in refocusing Penn State's strategic plan, including his evolving work to create a responsive budget process. David Gray is Senior Vice President for Finance and Business. Gray is leading Penn State in reducing cost, operating efficiency, and identifying creative and new revenue opportunities. Gentlemen, if you'd like to say a few words before we start the questions, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. It's great to be here, and thank you to everybody who's joining us live from offices around the Commonwealth. It's great to be here, great to be back. Dave and I have got a few opening remarks to make just to cover some of the bases about things that are going on around the university. These probably will set the stage for some questions that follow, but also just an opportunity for us to give you directly an update on some things that you may not be aware of that don't necessarily show up in the paper or in other communications. So it would be a severe disappointment for most people if I didn't begin by talking about something to do with strategic planning. I'll begin with that, but we actually do have a strategic plan for the university now. It was approved by the Board of Trustees back in February, and now we're moving on to the implementation phase of the strategic plan. Most of you will be hearing something about that in the near future because just as the planning process itself, we tried to make as inclusive as possible across the entire university, faculty, staff, students, alumni, friends of the university, basically anybody who was interested in contributing to the plan. We were open to ideas and suggestions. We're going to try to keep that same spirit alive as we move to implementation. So we have set up an implementation structure for the strategic plan that we hope will reach down deeply into the university and give everybody an opportunity to participate, to come up with ideas that they think may help us advance the plan implementation and provide a structure by which those can be filtered, discussed, improved, combined with other ideas, and then ultimately supported by the administration. This is not to say we don't have some specific things in mind, and I won't go into those. You've heard about those from me before or seen them at the website, strategicplan.psu.edu. I feel like I'm doing a presidential debate or something, giving people websites to... But we do have a website for the plan. You can always find information there about the plan and about the implementation. But needless to say, the types of ideas that we're looking for from across the institution are generally aligned with the priorities that we have articulated in both the institutional plan and in all of the unit level strategic plans, which are also available. So stay tuned and certainly look for opportunities to participate and again visit that website for more information. Related to the strategic plan, one of the things that we talked about from the beginning was the unique opportunity Penn State had in this round of strategic planning to align the strategic plan implementation with the next fundraising campaign, and indeed that is exactly what we have done. President Barron and I spent time over the summer going around talking to focus groups of alumni really across the country in many different cities, getting feedback to the way we were taking the strategic plan ideas and casting them in the context of a fundraising campaign. We got great feedback. We heard what we needed to hear, not necessarily always what we wanted to hear, but what we needed to hear, and I think that was very helpful in helping us frame the focus of this next fundraising campaign, which we are now live with at this moment. The campaign has three distinct but interrelated components. The first is open doors, ensuring that we can make a Penn State education accessible and affordable to anybody who desires to get one. Second, transformative experiences. We want to ensure that once you get to Penn State, that you really have an experience that is indeed transformative, and we need to make investments to ensure that that's the case. And then finally, impacting the world. We want Penn State to continue to be an impactful institution, certainly in the region, but in the Commonwealth, the nation, and the world. And so the fundraising themes are grouped around those three major focus areas, which align very nicely, as I've said, with the campaign. So there'll be more information coming out about the campaign as we proceed with it. Budget. We have a budget. We have an institutional budget. We have an appropriation from the Commonwealth, unlike this time last year. So this is great news, actually. The appropriation was approved in time. We got approval for the budget from the Board of Trustees in the July meeting. That included both a modest tuition increase for our students and also provided for a modest general salary increase pool of 2%. We are in the process of working through that GSI now to preempt a question which may come later. The general salary increase is retroactive to July 1. We just could not actually proceed to implement it until we had approval of the budget from the board and the approval of the appropriation from the Commonwealth. So we're working through that now. We're checking all of the numbers, and that will show up in paychecks very soon. Final thing I'll talk about and then hand to David is the implementation of the LionPath student information system. The good news is that we're in the second year of it. The second part of the good news is that means we're past the first year of the implementation of LionPath, which I know for many of our faculty, staff, and students was really a pretty stressful period. This is a big, new, complex, enterprise-wide information system, and Penn State is a challenging institution where one might choose to implement a major change like that. This was an effort that was many years, more than 3 years in the planning. We assembled a great team of Penn State people to come together, helped by external consultants to navigate through the transition. And by and large, that transition went extraordinarily well. That is not to say for a moment that it was without challenge. There were many, many challenges. There were challenges on the first day of classes. There were challenges in the admissions process. There were challenges in parents, or I should say authorized payers, being able to pay their sons or daughters' tuition bills. So many, many challenges, but the combined commitment of the LionPath implementation team and staff, faculty, and students across the institution, we've been able to push through a lot of those, with the exception of one, and that is what I would characterize as the ugliness of the interface. And that is a message that we have heard loud and clear, and in fact, as we speak, we're working on an improved user interface, so hopefully by the spring, it'll be a little bit more intuitive and attractive for our students to use. But that was pretty broadly panned, actually, by many people. I have to say that I can look out of my window in Old Main during the class change periods, and what I see every day is tens of thousands of students going to hundreds of classes taught by thousands of faculty, and by and large ending up where they need to be and getting what they set out to get that morning. So as challenging as this big transition has been, I think by and large we have accomplished what we set out to accomplish. There's a lot more work to be done, and we're going to need your patience and understanding as we continue to iron out all of the wrinkles associated with such a major transition. But we're through I think, the toughest part of the implementation, and we look forward as we go through the second year of really, I think, starting to be able to reap the benefits of the investment that we have made in this new system. So, David?
Thanks, Nick. There are 4 topics I want to address before we turn to your questions, and they are the HR Transformation Initiative and Project WorkLion, both of which are keenly interrelated, employee benefits, and leadership decision-making. Before I start, though, I must note that the last time I was in this venue was for a production of Sweeney Todd, the barber who did diabolical things to his customers. So I'm really hoping this is a kinder and gentler audience that we're facing here
Were
this
you
afternoon.
watching or acting?
No, I was
Okay.
watching. Thankfully, I was not a participant. The HR Transformation Initiative is well underway, and that involves a fundamental re-envisioning and restructuring of how HR support services are provided on behalf of the entire university. And that's really being carried out pursuant to 2 very successful pilot initiatives involving 4 of the colleges coming together to support, again, this restructuring of HR, pulling out routine processes from within the colleges and departments and putting them into a shared services environment. And we're now working on a 3rd, which is to take all the units of finance and business and consolidate them, leading to a full-scale university-wide transformation to a shared services environment next year. And that is very much tied and closely linked to Project WorkLion, which is our process to roll out a new HR and payroll system. And really, when you think about it, we talk about it as a replacement, but in truth, it is replacing our payroll system. But we don't truly have a genuine HR system in the comprehensive sense of the term. So this will really be Penn State's first foray into having a comprehensive, web-based, what we think will be very user-friendly HR system provided by Workday, which, as many of you may know, is a cloud-based solution provider. So with that infrastructure in place, scheduled for next June 30 is the targeted go-live for the WorkLion project, we will have all the sort of infrastructural pieces in place for the HR transformation to come to full fruition. We are also in the midst of building out leased space in Innovation Park over by the Penn Stater, where the new shared services team for HR in support of the HR Transformation Initiative will reside, along with the other HR partners. And we will be providing to each college, to each business unit, an HR strategic partner. Again, pulling a lot of the rote processing out from within those departments and colleges and units, centralizing that, but placing the strategic partners and appropriate support staff embedded in the colleges and in the units to really help those units do the things that are most strategically valuable to them, particularly the recruitment and retention of faculty and staff, which is, after all, the lifeblood of Penn State. So we're very excited about how that process is going on, and it's tracking very well, and we should be well positioned next year as we see the WorkLion project roll into being on July the 1st to also have that coupled very closely with the HR Transformation Initiative. Next topic to spend a little bit of time on, employee benefits. I know this is a matter of concern to all faculty and staff. Now, obviously, as we think about the total compensation program for the university, salary and employee benefits, health benefits in particular, are the things that are, I think, of most acute concern to all of us as employees. And how do we sort of keep pace with the cost increases that we're having to shoulder? It's a difficult challenge. Nick talked a little bit about, the university's budget and the challenges we have there with really supplying sufficient new revenues to take care of all the different expenditure requirements that the university has. Just a few weeks ago, I met with several members of our administrative team, as we always do in September of the year, to do a look back on how we had done in the whole area of the university's medical expenses. And that we take a look at the entire array of medical expenses, irrespective of whether it's the portion that the university pays for or the portion that the employee pays for. We're really looking at all medical claims. The last couple of fiscal years, at the end of fiscal year 14 and 15, we saw a moderation in the inflationary trend in our medical expenses. They were running somewhere between 4 and 6% per year for the 2 prior years. But when we tore into the medical expenses for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2016, what we saw and were quite startled by was a 14.7% increase in those medical expenses. So again, when you think about the fact that we're dealing with a base, a starting point that's north of $240 million, and when you inflate that by almost 15%, you're talking about a substantial hit on the university's bottom line, and we have to find the resources to withstand that. We have a long-standing principle here at Penn State that we're trying mightily to hold on to, and that is a cost share between the institution and employees of 75-25. And when I talk about the employees having the responsibility for withstanding 25% of the total cost, that includes everything from your premiums, your deductibles, your co-pays, and so forth. But you can imagine when we're seeing cost inflation of the kind I just described, everything is going up. The university's share, its 75% share is escalating, and so must the employees' share. So when we're dealing with the open enrollment period and we're pushing out information, I hope you're all taking the time to have a close look at that and decide which plan best meets you and your family's needs. As you're taking a look at that, be cognizant of the fact that you're seeing some escalation, in particular with the health savings plan. We're trying to hold the premiums constant on the PPO Blue plan, so you're not going to see any changes there at all in 2017. But for the PPO savings plan, we will be increasing the premiums and some of the deductibles that you can expect to see. At the same time that we're doing that, we are planning to increase the seed that the university provides, the investment that the university provides for the health savings accounts for employees with salaries under $60,000. Those will be increasing by 50%, both for individuals and for families. So for individuals, from $400 to $600 per year into the university's investment into your health savings account. For families, from $800 to $1,200 per year. So an appreciable increase for those employees at or under the $60,000 salary threshold. So this is something the university feels we can do that will really help to protect and preserve that option for our lower salaried colleagues. So very much concerned about maintaining the affordability of benefits. We understand the constraints that we all face. But just understand that when we're faced sometimes with the kinds of increases that we are, both the university and the employees have to withstand and shoulder their share, proportionate share of the burden. A lot of you have questioned how the university goes about making its leadership decisions. And it is not an easy process necessarily to follow, but one in which collaboration and consultation, I think, are the baseline expectations. Very fortunate to have in Nick Jones a wonderful colleague that I feel we can collaborate with very, very closely and do. He and I meet on a regular basis. We also meet with Dr. Barron on a regular and routine basis, weekly with our colleagues on the President's Council. Nick and the President also meet on a monthly basis with the Academic Leadership Council, the deans, and the chancellors. And then many, many other meetings with people at all levels of the organization. I maintain, as I think Nick does, an open door policy. We certainly don't turn anybody away and are most interested in engaging dialogue with our faculty and staff colleagues about the things that most concern you. But I would characterize our leadership decision-making model as being very collaborative and hopefully one that's transparent. Part of the objective behind having these town halls for faculty and staff is to really make us accessible to you, to hear your concerns, to understand the issues that are on your mind, and to try and provide some insight into how we go about our decision-making processes. And that, I think, is the key here. And I'm not sure that has been any precedent for that in the past here at Penn State, but certainly we're trying to throw this process wide open so that there are no secrets, that you have really a full view into the decision-making processes, that you have a chance to raise the questions that are of deepest and most fundamental concern to you, and we in turn take those back, and believe me, we discuss them around the leadership table. We may not always have answers at the ready, but we certainly go back, ponder, and hopefully get back to you with responses that are as responsive as they can possibly be. Thank you.
Okay, and thank both of you. And thank you all for submitting your questions. We're going to go to that portion now, and I would like to remind you that you can still email in questions at questions@psu.edu. You can tweet us questions at #PSUstrong, and if you have a question in the audience that you'd like to submit, people are coming around to collect those. And again, one more time, your questions will be kept anonymous. We've gotten several questions about the new volunteer-based retirement plan. And this person asked, they understand that health insurance premiums will be tied to their former salary for up to 1 year. And they're asking, why are health insurance premiums tied to one's compensation rate on a single date when actual salary levels may drop?
Well, I think we simply put, we had to peg the salaries for the VRP to where they were at the time that the program was activated. So it's that salary level that we're really focusing and keying in on in terms of the calibration of the voluntary retirement program. The one thing that I think bears mentioning there with respect to the VRP, some folks have characterized it, I think, as we're trying to rush people to the door, and really nothing could be further from the truth. It is entirely voluntary. We mean it as nothing other than that, and folks shouldn't assume that merely because we're providing an option to them that we're steering them in one direction or the other. It is, at the end of the day, just a decision option that is completely at the discretion of the employee, but those are the terms under which we're providing it. And we have to we have to stay very much in order to conform to federal law, which certainly exists around programs of this nature. We just have to be very precise and stay within the guidelines that we've outlined for folks.
And this next question is also related to the VRP, and they're trying to understand, as a Penn State employee working at the College of Medicine for over 34 years, why they are not being given the same opportunity for an early retirement incentive that other Penn State employees have been offered.
I can take that one. So when the idea for the voluntary retirement program was put together, it was really built around what the needs were of particular business units. And so there were conversations with all of the budget executives across the institution. That's why you saw a little bit of variation for some units and the exclusion of others. In the view of the leadership at the College of Medicine, participation in the voluntary retirement program would have been detrimental to the ability of the college to conduct its business moving forward, very disruptive. And of course, being the College of Medicine, part of Hershey Medicine, that is not an area where we really can afford to have big disruption in our workforce. And so College of Medicine elected to not participate, as did some other units like the Applied Research Lab, also did not participate in the VRP.
Thank you both. I'm going to switch gears, and we have several questions about the FLSA. And first one being, what will the impact on the university be of the recent expansion of workers who are eligible to earn overtime pay? And any idea what percentage of university employees do you anticipate earning overtime under this change who did not earn overtime before?
I think the actual numbers of those earning overtime will be relatively small. We intend to try and manage so that we're not paying any more overtime than is necessary. But with that said, there will certainly be an impact from the implementation of the FLSA. It's going to be into the millions of dollars that the university has to withstand. It's a little bit difficult to, determine that with complete precision at this time. And it's also important to point out that as recently as today, we learned of some efforts within Congress to possibly delay the implementation of the FLSA change provisions. I don't think there's a great likelihood that particular bill is actually going to succeed. It may pass the House, but there doesn't seem to be great support in the Senate, and I also doubt very seriously that President Obama would sign it even if it did reach his desk. But nonetheless, it continues to be an area where there is a good deal of flux, and so we're keeping a close eye on it. But all of our people, all of our managers have been very much on the alert for it and preparing really to manage through it to minimize the impact to the degree we can. But there's no question that it's going to cost the university several millions of dollars to implement the changes.
I believe we actually have a meeting, I think it's later this week, actually, to discuss our strategy to approach this. It's still nominally several months away. And as David indicated, this has to be a consideration at the unit level and at the subunit level, but ultimately we're very cognizant of the fact that this comes down and affects individual people. And so we're very mindful of individual impacts, and transitioning from non-exempt to exempt can have impacts on individual people, and so we need actually a rather complex strategy to figure out how to manage this as an institution in aggregate, but also be very sensitive to the impacts on our individual staff and postdocs.
And one of the potential changes there would be switching to how much vacation accrual someone can work. Has there been any talks of that, and when would people be able to expect some information there?
Well, I think we'll probably have a better sense of that after we've had our meeting later this week to really review the detailed planning that's been going on. So there should be more information coming out on this fairly soon, I think.
Thank you. We've gotten a couple of questions asking about the differences between faculty and staff in regards to maternity leave. It came up at the last town hall, and we have some more questions. Can you explain why there is a difference in that process?
Yes, well, faculty don't really earn vacation leave, so they're in sort of a fundamentally different category than non-faculty staff and administrators. We are going to take a closer look at that, but I think it's important to point out that as we consider the potential for making some policy changes there for non-faculty employees, that we do provide what I think, if you compare us to our peers, we provide, I think, a very generous array of leave entitlements, both with respect to vacation and sick time. So in the meantime, folks can certainly avail themselves of that, but we will be taking a closer look at that policy.
In regards to Lion Path, we've had some specific questions. I know there was some concerns for, particularly in the music department, they have very, very specific needs where they need to have a room with a piano for certain classes. And they've been telling us that they've had to go around to other people in their department to find the right room and work through the process that way. Is there any looking into unit-specific problems created by or related to Lion Path?
Yeah, we have. It's definitely a work in progress. First of all, just to clarify, room scheduling is not a Lion Path function. Unfortunately, there are many things that are being blamed on Lion Path for which Lion Path is not responsible. I think the rain yesterday was not the fault of Lion Path. So just to be clear, we have a room scheduling system which happens to be new, and the rollout of the new CollegeNet scheduling system coincided with the rollout of Lion Path. We did need a new one because the old one was compatible with ISIS, but it was not going to be compatible, nor could it be compatible with Lion Path. And so we've had a transition with this as well. What one often finds is when you transition from the way you've done business for decades to a new way of doing business, many of the things that were kind of connected together with, sometimes literally almost with chewing gum and string, and worked, failed to work. We had it turns out multiple databases or sources of information about rooms, many of which were in conflict with one another. Some would say that there were 54 chairs or tables in the room. Another one would say that there were 64. Well, that makes a big difference if you have a class of 60 and you're trying to schedule a room. And so we've been working furiously to try to resolve a lot of those database inconsistencies. It turns out also that as you transition to a new system, if the attributes on the supply side, like the rooms, are not entered not only consistently but correctly, or they are not requested consistently, then you can end up having a mismatch. And I think one of my favorite ones last year was that in one of the first trial runs of the optimizer, a swimming class was scheduled in the IST building. And I was assured by the dean that it reflected the deep pool of talent he had in his faculty, but I don't think it was what was intended. So sometimes this was just a supply-side attribute and a demand-side attribute that didn't match up. So many problems like that. That actually I would characterize in large part as a relatively easy problem because it's obvious. So it's easy to identify. We can go in and make the adjustments that are necessary to address it. There are other problems that lurk just below the surface that are a little bit more difficult to first identify, and then when you do identify them, actually figure out what the resolution needs to be. And so we've got lots of people across the university, in the units, in the registrar's office, working very hard to resolve all of these issues. I think as we go into the scheduling for the spring semester, things will be better than the fall, and certainly as we roll into next fall, as we learned how the system works and how it all views us, and we've resolved many of these database issues, I think the situation will improve dramatically.
Okay. This person has asked that they don't understand why decision-making has become so top-down at Penn State. And they feel that this has been noticeable since 2011. Decisions are being made without input from faculty and staff that have had a large negative effect on the lives of them. And so many new systems have been put in place regarding international travel, Lion Path, PSU, the child abuse training, and as you mentioned, the reallocation of classroom space according to an algorithm. Can you address that?
I can take a crack at that, at least for starters. I did talk a little bit about leadership decision making, and necessarily I think the President Barron, Provost Jones, and I have to own some responsibility for ultimately making the decisions that are going to have an impact on the university. But it's only done, I think, after copious consultation with colleagues at all levels, really. And again, trying to, I think, open up the decision-making process to the maximum extent we possibly can. I'm thinking about something like where we have to deal with our health benefits, and I talked a little bit about the tough decisions we have to make in light of the cost context that we're looking at there. But President Barron 2 years ago established a healthcare advisory committee, which is broadly inclusive of our faculty colleagues. It contains the chair of the Faculty Senate. It contains the chairs of the Faculty Benefits Committee from the Faculty Senate, as well as the Joint Committee on Insurance and Benefits. It contains other faculty colleagues and deans. It contains staff colleagues, all engaged in the very arduous decision-making processes that we have to work our way through to deal with the healthcare environment and the health insurance planning that we need to do as a university to make sure that we can continue to offer our employees the highest quality healthcare at an affordable price. It's an exceedingly difficult, it's easy to say, it's very hard to do. But in that process, what I'm trying to describe is something where we have, as an administration, reached out in a very proactive way to our colleagues to solicit their input. And I think if you asked any one of them that are engaged in that, they would tell you their input is taken with utter seriousness, and it has a deep impact on the planning that we're doing and that you'll see roll out. In fact, what we're talking about doing in 2017, the changes that I just discussed with the health programs that are now accessible to you through the open benefits, open enrollment site, all of those were discussed, and really dialogue was essential through the Healthcare Advisory Committee before we made those final determinations about the reshaping of the plan for 2017, and that will continue as we move forward into the future in 2018 and beyond. I offer that just as one example of what I think is rather an unprecedented and perhaps even extraordinary effort on the part of the administration to reach into and out to our faculty and staff colleagues to engage them in a process that directly affects them in a very authentic and sincere fashion.
Yeah, I might respond to that one too, because this is important, and with respect to the framer of the question, I actually have a different perspective from him or her. I actually made some notes earlier. David spoke before about how decisions are made, and I made my own notes, which largely comport with what David had said, but as he was answering that question, I just was scanning down my list, and the list includes, after you've identified the problem or the opportunity, ask questions, listen to the responses, reframe the questions, and then ask and listen again. Develop a strategy, receive feedback, make a decision, communicate the decision, and then tweak as circumstances dictate once a decision has been made and has been implemented. And I just go through that list because I think it does emphasize in a way that David did also, that in all of these decisions processes, we really place a premium on getting as much input as we can to the definition of the problem or the opportunity, to the framing of the strategy, and then ultimately to its implementation. I think this is not a criticism at all, but just an observation. One of the biggest challenges we have in a big, distributed, complex institution like this is communication. And I think we are always trying to do better at that, and we've made some great advances in recent years, but it is difficult often to communicate decisions and decision processes out broadly to our community in ways that are not overwhelming and people can really embrace and understand. And so I do think in all of these processes too, we are mindful of the fact that people are very busy. I mean, everybody is hard at work, whether you're a faculty member or a staff member or a student. You are here studying or working or doing research, whatever, and you are very busy. And so we do consult, and we consult broadly, but we are very mindful of not overburdening our people and trying to pull them into too many committees and assign them to tasks beyond what we expect of them in a regular workday. And so we're always trying to get that balance right between getting as much input and consultation as we can, but also respecting the fact that there are only 24 hours in a day, and most people have a lot of those spoken for.
Thank you. You've mentioned both the forthcoming raises and an increase in healthcare cost. This person's question, they're afraid that that increase in their salary is just going to be eaten up by those increase in healthcare cost, and asked if you're aware of this and if there are any things being done to minimize the rising required cost.
Well, as I mentioned, even in the face of the kinds of dramatic changes we're seeing in the cost profile of our health plan, for the many faculty and staff that are enrolled in the PPO Blue plan, there will be no premium increases in 2017. I really want to stress that. I think that's crucial and should indicate the university's resolve to try and mitigate, to the extent we possibly can, the cost burden for our faculty and staff colleagues. There will be some premium increases as well as deductible increases for those that are enrolled in the PPO savings plan, but again, all in an attempt to sort of balance out and stay true to that 75-25 proportional cost share cost-sharing model that I described. But as we move into the future, I think everybody has to be cognizant of the fact that we're going to have to share the burden of increased costs together. We are either going to have to find ways, again, together, working collaboratively, to bend that cost curve down, or we're going to have to, if we're unable to, we're going to have to distribute those cost increases, again, according to that 75-25 model. So it's incumbent on all of us, I think, both the administration and all of us as individual consumers of the health plans, to try to do our level best to really help us curb those costs so that we can maintain a very, very high quality, affordable program of health care. But there's no magic behind this. When you're facing 14 and 15% annual increases, I hope that's an aberration. We're tearing into our claims data to try and better understand the dynamics that drove that increase last fiscal year. But until we understand that better, we're hoping it's a one-shot thing and that we'll see those rates of increase begin to decline. But in the meantime, we have to be prepared for whatever may come at us. And if that rate of increase continues, then we're going to have to engage our faculty and staff in cost burden sharing. We don't have any magical way to do it, particularly when we're also trying, as I think you're well aware of, the university's strategic initiative led by President Barron to maintain affordable, accessible programs for our students and to keep a lid on tuition rates. So that's a very delicate scale that we're trying to balance here.
And I would just put a point on the fact that to some degree these are two somewhat independent processes, but there is an interaction between them. So we work very hard as an administration to argue for a budget that provides for as high a general salary increase pool as we can get, as we believe is deserved, and we can afford. So we always go to bat for the biggest number that we can with our Board of Trustees. For example, the benefits program, particularly health, because we are self-insured and we pay for all of our own medical costs, we have to cover the cost of that program in the manner that David indicated, the 75-25 split. So these are two somewhat independent processes, but they interact because they both show up on your paycheck. One is a plus and one is a minus, and we're aware of that. One way we can address it is we could, for example, shift the burden from 75-25 to the university covering 85% and the individual 15%. But that 10% of additional cost that gets covered by the university actually has to come out of the same pool of funds that provides for the general salary increase. And so if we're using it to cover those premium costs, then we will not have the resources available to do a general salary increase at the same level. So there is, at some level, an interactivity between those, and we're very sensitive to this issue, and we're very sensitive to the fact that, it does appear that we're giving it with the left hand and taking it away with the right. And I can assure you that both of us work very hard on the GSI side and on the healthcare cost side to try to be mindful of the interactivity between them.
And before we move off this particular topic, let me just kind of key you into another stress point that we're dealing with. I think you're all aware of the statewide problem with the state retirement systems, the school employees retirement system and the state employees retirement system. About a third of our employees, our full-time employees, are members of the state employees retirement system. We just did a look back over the past 5 fiscal years, and the employer contribution rate that Penn State pays to Harrisburg on behalf of the third of our employees that are members of SERS went from about $14.6 million in fiscal year 11, 5 years ago, to a projected over $90 million this fiscal year. I haven't calculated the percentage increase between 14.6 and 90. You can do the math. It's dramatic. But again, this is all coming out of the general fund, that same pool of money that has to fund health care, that has to fund general salary increases, that has to fund our other employee benefits. And you know, we don't have a limitless pool of resources here. So again, I'm not asking you to get out your violins, but just be aware that this is a struggle, and these are very real costs that the university is trying to absorb, while at the same time doing its level best to make sure we're in a position to provide a salary increase pool for all of you, and also to continue to fund competitive benefits programs for all of you.
And if I can follow up on that follow-up of my follow-up of yours, just to put that in context, which I think is important, I don't know what the percentage is either, but it's an order $80 million increase, close to that, say $75 million increase. To put that in context, if we get a 1% increase in our general funds appropriation from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that will increase our budget by just north of $2 million a year. So that's a 1% increase. If we increase tuition across the board by 1%, that will generate additional revenue of just a little more than $10 million a year. So when you're trying to fill a $75-odd million gap in retirement contributions, that's a big tuition increase, and it is a massive appropriation increase in order to get to a number of that magnitude. So that hopefully will help you put in context a little bit just some of the balls that we're trying to juggle here, and that's just retirement contribution, setting aside the increases in the cost of health benefits and others. So our sources are relatively few in number and limited in their ability to grow rapidly to respond to some of these externalities.
And as you're looking at those potential changes in the future, is it on the table to cut down on the options that people have for their health insurance plans, where there would only be the one?
As we go forward, and we're dealing with the healthcare cost inflation environment that I described, everything is on the table. What is not on the table is any backing away from providing high-quality, affordable health plan with elements of choice for our employees. So I can't tell you exactly what the Healthcare Advisory Committee is going to look at and recommend to the administration for plan design in 2018 or beyond, but suffice to say that there are some of those key principles of high-quality programs, elements of choice that we're going to hold on to for dear life, and those are things that we consider to be sacrosanct. But you know, I don't think we're at a point yet, again, given that we're just kind of newly looking at an almost 15% increase that we were not expecting. We're going to have to drill down into that, understand the shape of that better, and whether it portends more such dramatic increases in the future. And we may have to consider adjustments as necessary to meet our projections. But obviously, a high-quality plan is not one of the things that we intend to sacrifice.
Acknowledging that you don't know the specifics, one person asked, some insurance programs will give you benefits or reductions in rates for healthy lifestyle choices. Mm-hmm. Is that possible on a scale like Penn State's?
I think we can. That's certainly something that the administration, again in consultation with the advisory committee, can look at. We certainly want to do those things that are sensible, that encourage all of us to make healthy lifestyle choices and pursue them, because we know that in the long run they will have a very beneficial effect on overall medical expenses and claims. So sure, I think that's something we can take a look at in the future.
Are there any plans to replace the U at PSU performance management system, or is this one here to stay for a while?
The U at PSU system is here for one more year, for the performance year that we're currently in, the 2016-17 academic year. But, and hold on to your seats, there is a new program coming, and it's actually part of Project Work Lion. The Workday application that we will be using effective July 1 of next year will include with it a new, very, very contemporary web-based interface for performance evaluations. And so we will be shifting away from the You at PSU tool that you're presently using to a new tool. Performance evaluations, the setting of annual objectives and goals with your supervisor will continue, but you will be using a different and hopefully much better tool to help support that process.
And I just emphasize that last point that David made. I think what is not going away is a commitment to ensuring that all of our employees are evaluated on their performance, that they have regular meetings with their supervisors to discuss performance, and that their compensation is related to how well they are doing their jobs. That those are very important state-of-the-art industry practices. People should not have to expect arbitrary salary increases based on things other than work performance. And so those principles will continue, but the mechanics of how it is done will change for sure.
We have two questions related to how people get onto campus and how they get to their offices. First off, is there any plan to try and reduce the cost of parking for faculty and staff?
I'm not aware of any plans to reduce parking costs for faculty and staff at this time. Unfortunately, again, another economic reality that people often don't think about. There are costs to maintain those lots and parking decks. They are not inexpensive. You think about snow clearance, you just think about routine maintenance, operations and maintenance costs. So there are just normal costs of doing business, and we have to share them, and so we all have those costs. There aren't, I don't think, any plans for dramatic increases, but certainly I think those costs are going to remain with us.
And one way people get around those parking costs is by taking the public transportation system.
Yes.
And we're a big fan of that. Is there any plans to try and increase it beyond the State College borough limits to sort of help people that live a little bit further away?
Well, the arrangements that we have with CATA, and the university is a longtime partner with the CATA system. It's a wonderful relationship that we have, and it already does. Obviously, the route network does expand beyond the borough of State College, and we're certainly in nonstop dialogue with our friends at CATA and with our transportation services people, and we will do everything we can within again economic boundaries to try and provide good incentives to use what's a very robust public transportation system. That is one way for people not only to avoid parking but also to help us with some of our sustainability goals.
And this question came to us from Twitter, and it says that Canvas is great, but the discussion forums are a huge problem. Communication and online courses is essentially non-functional, and is there any solution on the horizon there?
Actually, that's the first I've heard of that. I would just say noted. We will pass that along, and I can answer the last part. Yes, there will be a solution on the horizon because this obviously is something that's very, very important, but we'll make sure that gets passed along. By and large, I will say that the Canvas rollout has gone relatively smoothly. In fact, we've heard relatively few concerns expressed about it, so that has been an enterprise-wide deployment that has gone well. Again, obviously not perfectly. It is a rolling implementation, so it'll take several years before all of the courses that have existed for, in some cases, many years in Angel get transitioned over to Canvas. So some students are having to deal with or learn both systems. But by and large, I think the Canvas implementation has been a successful one. But we will pay attention to that particular issue.
Question, besides the cultural events, what policy initiatives are associated with the diversity and inclusion focus this year?
So let me take a first shot at that. Vice Provost Marcus Whitehurst, who reports to me, has laid out an entire schedule of programming for the entire academic year, actually, in this space. I believe it's all documented on I think we have a website. That URL I don't know, but I think we have it on a website, and it's going to include not only as you indicate, the cultural events, but there's going to be, we hope to schedule a conference late in the spring around this topic, and a series of more academically focused events. The first one of which is in October, I think.
October 6th, I think.
Is it October 6th? Where Steve Dunham, who is the university's general counsel, will be moderating a discussion about about First Amendment and related issues. So we're hoping to have a whole series of interrelated events around this topic.
I would throw in too, very closely related. The Task Force on Policing in Communities of Color recently completed its work. Lydia Abdullah from my staff chaired that very important task force, and we received several recommendations that emerged from their final report. This was a joint task force commissioned by Borough Manager Tom Fontaine from State College Borough and me. We have received those recommendations and now have turned them over for implementation to Tom King, who is the former chief of police in the borough and now the assistant borough manager, and Charlie Knopfsinger, our assistant vice president for police and public safety here at the university. So Charlie and Tom King will be reporting on a regular basis to Tom Fontaine and myself with respect to the progress that they're making in the rollout of and implementation of the task force's recommendations, among which were much more assertive efforts in the recruitment and retention of police officers of color, both here at the university and at the borough, where I think, if we're being honest, the two police forces are not terribly diverse at the present time. We must do a better job, and the task force, I think, pointed that out to us and gave us some pointed recommendations to help deal with that, and we are taking that charge very seriously and are going to be holding ourselves to account, and we'll be very open with you, the members of the community, about how we're doing in that regard.
I would also add, all of the town halls that we've had so far have covered, we normally address some specific topics in our opening remarks, but then we just throw the floor open to general questions. We haven't really thematically oriented any of the town halls, and I believe we are working on planning one of the town halls for this year in that same vein that will focus around issues of diversity and inclusion, and hope to have a different type of town hall from the standard ones.
Thank you. Here's a specific question. Why is the university matching contributions at a higher percentage to TIA-CREF than it is to SERS?
Matching contributions to TIA-CREF at a higher percentage?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure about the premise of the question, but let me try and tell you what I know to be factual. The university is subject to the state retirement code. Unlike our sister institutions, our sister state-related universities, Pitt, Temple, and Lincoln, are not subject to the state retirement code through some quirk of legislative history that nobody is probably alive to talk about. Penn State University is part of the state retirement code. That stipulates that for our new employees, they must make an option at the time of hiring to go into either the state employees retirement system or TIA-CREF, now TIA as it's called, which is known in the retirement code as the alternate retirement plan. It is the TIA plan. The employer contribution rate is pegged statutorily fixed and has been since around 1980 at 9.29%. So it is immovable. Now that's, at least from a budgetary perspective, one variable we don't have to worry about because it doesn't vary. It's statutorily locked, and I'm not aware of any attempts to change it. But with respect to SERS, obviously the employer contribution rate there is dictated by the State Employees Retirement Board, and they come to us through the state budget office and tell us, each spring what our employer contribution rate will be for the new fiscal year that starts July 1st. The university has nothing to say about that. We simply have to adhere to it. So the two plans are really radically different, but they're both governed by the state retirement code that we, the university, are captive to, I guess you could say.
I would add that, you know, in the spirit of offering choice too, we offer a defined benefit plan, as in SERS, and a defined contribution plan, TIAA CREF, to all employees, and new employees have the choice. On TIAA CREF, many of the Penn State folks who are in TIAA CREF are faculty, and these are faculty for whom we compete with institutions around the country. And in fact, part of the reason many faculty are in a defined contribution plan like TIAA CREF is that some of them have moved here from other institutions, and they want to be able to move their benefit or their retirement savings with them. When we compete for faculty in particular with other institutions around the nation, in order to be competitive, we need to make contributions. We need to obviously compete on salary, and we need to compete on benefits. And in benefits, that includes, an element of the benefits is the retirement contribution. So we need to compete on that as well. And so we have a number that we feel makes us sufficiently competitive with peer institutions, so we are able to recruit faculty. Once we set what that contribution amount is, it simply would be unfair to offer the TIAA CREF defined contribution plan to staff and give a different amount. In fact, I think we're not allowed to do that by law. Once it's set, and we offer it to faculty and staff. So some of the setting of that number is really defined by a broader national level competitive environment around benefits.
We have a follow-up question from one of our earlier topics at U at PSU. And coming in from Twitter, they're asking, will all the information that was associated with their U at PSU account transfer to the new system that is part of Project Workline?
I would assume the answer is yes, but I'm not 100% positive, so we will investigate that and get back with a definitive answer.
I don't think anybody should count on all of their goals going away.
No.
So I'd stay focused on what they are, but I'd have a hard copy just in case.
All marked as achieved?
Right.
All right, we have got a couple of questions about Lion Path, and specifically this person says, it's caused issues and stress for staff and students. How, as a staff member, can we assist students in getting their refunds in a timely manner? How do we address parents and students who have received outside scholarships for the academic year and the system will not allow that money to be divided between the two semesters? How can we help the students?
Yeah, so I would say any of those problems that are that severe, where students are not able to get refunds, these are very serious problems, and I can assure the person who posed the question that these are our highest priorities for the Lion Path implementation team. I think the best way this individual and others can help in terms of communicating with students and their families is just tell them that this is our highest priority to ensure that these matters are addressed on a timely basis.
Presumably they're working with folks in the bursar's office. If they're not, they should be. Our folks in the bursar's office have been working overtime, quite literally, really trying to help parents and students resolve these kinds of issues, and I think are doing really a pretty decent job of working through what had been a substantial backlog back around the beginning of the semester. But certainly if there are any lingering problems, students and or parents should be reaching out to the bursar's office for assistance.
And one thing I would add is what we've seen many times, because we're Penn State and we're not this big, we're this big, one small problem or glitch or flag that has been set or toggle that is a 0 instead of a 1 can inadvertently create the same issue for a large number of people. And so what does that do? That generates a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails and a lot of concern being expressed. But once that single source problem has been identified and resolved, and the switch gets set to where it needs to be, the problem is resolved for a large number of people. And in a case like this, the dollars will flow very quickly. And so literally the team is lining these issues up, resolving them on a daily basis, and I think addressing them in big chunks. So.
We have another question from the audience on how they can help a problem. And they say that they feel at a loss as a community member on how to respond or deal with the high incidences of sexual offenses. They find it very disturbing, and they're getting these notifications via email and text, and they feel that it's helpful to gain awareness, but is it translating to action, and what can they as Penn State employees do?
That's a really great, that is great question and comment. I mean, this is a really important issue for the nation. It's an important issue for all of our peer institutions. I don't know of any other provost in the country who is not dealing with this issue in one form or another. It's important for us as members of this particular community, whether you are faculty, staff, obviously a student, or a parent, or several of the above in many instances. And I am a parent, and I have 2 daughters here, and so this is an issue that is very important to me on a personal level as well as a professional one. I would offer, I'll make a comment first and then offer some suggestions. First, we take this issue very, very seriously. President Barron commissioned a sexual assault task force last year. It made a series of, I think, 14 recommendations. They were all accepted by the president and have either been implemented or are in the process of being implemented now, and some of these had really far-reaching consequences, something that we take very seriously. In terms of recommendations, one I would make is talk about this issue. Don't bury it. I mean, there's a little bit of a tendency because it's an uncomfortable issue to talk about. Sometimes people don't like to talk about it. We should be talking about this. We should be getting this out in the open and really engaging colleagues in dialogue about this and what can we be doing as a community, just as it is a challenge that I think afflicts really and is owned by the entire community. Only as a community working together will we be able to solve this. No edict from Old Main is going to address this issue and make it go away. It's going to really require everybody in the community talking, engaging, and working together to get this issue out in the open, to communicate very publicly and very clearly that this is not something that we accept or tolerate, and that we intend as a community to do something about it. Is that going to stop tomorrow things from happening? No, it's not. But I think the more that we can talk about this and the more that we can put this up very visibly as something that we as a community take seriously, I think the more we can do that, the better.
This issue is a national scourge and a national shame, and certainly we see it here, it's elsewhere, but we have to deal with it here locally. It affects us as a community, and I agree with everything Nick said. With police and public safety reporting to me, I get all too many of those text alerts about yet another sexual assault. If there's maybe, and I say maybe, a silver lining around the cloud, it's that the people in student affairs and in police think that it's actually a healthy sign that there is more reporting. And that is the first step toward, I think, full awareness on the part of all the community that sexual violence, sexual harassment is unacceptable to us as a community. It is completely detached from all the values that we uphold, and we must encourage people that believe and are victims of this to report and put us in a position where we as a community can address it in an appropriate fashion. So that is a key first step. We must have the reporting. We must have folks feel, if they're victims of sexual assault or sexual harassment, that they can step forward knowing that they will be supported by an entire community that will be behind them and will help them work through that crisis. So I take it as a small ray of hope that there is more reporting, that people are feeling comfortable enough now to step forward and report this kind of heinous situation.
And if you are aware or you observe and you feel that you should say something, say something. You should report. In fact, it is our expectation and your obligation to report and know also that you will be fully supported. And if you don't feel that it was followed up upon, then pursue it further, because we do not and should not accept this in our community.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions regarding inclusion, and what is the university doing to increase diversity and inclusion amongst faculty and staff?
Well, let me take the faculty one. First of all, I will begin by saying that I and my colleagues in leadership and throughout the university just fundamentally believe in the importance of building an inclusive environment, which really demands that we are a diverse environment. We have made a commitment to diversity one of the foundational elements in the strategic plan, which means that in everything that we do while we're implementing the strategic plan, we need to be paying attention to building inclusivity. And we are going to be holding ourselves accountable. We're going to be holding our people accountable to that goal. It doesn't mean making sure that we've got different percentages next year from the percentages that we have had last year. It's about ensuring that our environments are inclusive, that we welcome people and perspectives from diverse viewpoints, and we must be really committed to that. What that means for me at my level, and that permeates down through the deans and the department heads, is we need to ensure that when we do searches for faculty members, that we are casting a very broad net and ensuring that those searches are done in a very inclusive manner and nobody is being excluded. And in fact, the complete opposite, that everybody is being brought into that search so that we're able to recruit truly the best possible people for any appointment that we make. I don't have to tell you that we are budgetarily stressed as an institution. That is the new reality. It's always going to be that way. Every dollar we invest in a faculty appointment has to be a dollar that is well invested, and we need to make sure we get the best people that we can bring into this institution to complement the faculty that we have now, to provide the best learning environment that we can for our students. That demands that we pay attention to diversity, and it is a commitment that I am right behind the deans and department heads on, and I am prepared to invest resources as necessary to help make that happen.
One of the, I think, very tangible commitments that's been made is the actual opening up of 2 new positions in the Office of Human Resources, a director level position and then a professional staff support position, both of which will have a focus on diversity recruitment of both faculty and staff. So I think that is a very tangible expression of our commitment to see that we do better in terms of bolstering our pools. If you don't have folks from diverse backgrounds in the pools, you don't have a prayer of hiring them. That's obvious. But I think our bringing these 2 new professional positions in-house will tangibly help us improve in that regard. We also have a diversity director in finance and business. As I mentioned earlier, Lydia Abdullah works hard on our improvement in diversity within the units of finance and business. And every 3 to 4 years, we do a diversity climate survey in finance and business. We just completed one and are now in the process of actually disseminating the individual results for each of the finance and business units to their unit heads. Lydia is sitting down with each unit head going over the results of the climate survey with all the leadership team in finance and business, tearing into where we see issues, where there may be climate problems that can and need to be addressed. So that is another, I think, tangible demonstration of our commitment that we are reaching out in an open survey method to our staff and asking them to tell us how they feel about the environment for diversity and inclusion within the F&B units.
And looking at a different aspect of inclusion, this person asked, what's being done to make students who started their journey with Penn State at one of the Commonwealth campuses but are now transitioning here to University Park, what's being done to make them more included in the process and make them feel at home here?
Yeah, that is actually a very important consideration, and it is something that we are focusing on. One of the uniquenesses of Penn State is this enduring 2+2 program that we have had for many, many years, where students from across the Commonwealth, in fact across the nation and the world, can start at a Commonwealth campus and transition to University Park as they start their junior year. That transition, as alluded to in the question, is not always an easy transition for people to make. Many students start at one of our campus locations because they need to live at home for that first couple of years for particular reasons. Maybe they are working locally. By living at home, they won't have the housing costs, so they live in an environment that is probably closer to what they experienced in high school than what one would expect at coming to University Park. Then when they transition to University Park as juniors, they go through all of the adjustments and all of the challenges that many of our freshmen do when they move straight to University Park from their particular hometown. That's something that we pay very careful attention to, and there are many tools that we use to help students with that transition. We have lots of evidence that demonstrates without question that students who transition to University Park from campuses are every bit as successful as students who've started at University Park. So we've got really great aspirations that guide us here. These students can be successful, but we recognize that there is a transition for them to make. And so we have a number of programs underway to help with that transition and help provide better advising and support, particularly in the beginning of that junior year as they are managing their way through that transition.
And speaking of how students, progress through their years here, this person asked, said that thousands of highly successful Penn Staters graduated under the term system, which allowed them the flexibility in course scheduling and softening the financial consequences of changing majors. In a world where everything is changing, do you foresee that Penn State would consider returning to that term system or something shorter than the current 15-week semester?
No. It's always a consideration. One of my daughters is in California at one of the UC schools. They're on a term system. I went through grad school on a term system. It's a different system. It has its merits. It has its strengths. But the semester system too has its merits and its strengths. It's always a little bit of a balance and a trade-off. I think as far as I can see for the foreseeable future, I don't really see us transitioning away from a semester-based system in the foreseeable future.
This person went on to ask, would there be any benefits to that if students would feel more focused in a short semester? You alluded to some benefits to it there, and then they might have less time to party or procrastinate.
Let me take a crack at that, because I was actually a student in the term system back here at Penn State, which dates me. But I can say that I don't think there's any appreciable difference in the focus that students have in one modality versus the other. I didn't notice. I observed in my student colleagues at the time no less inclination to have fun than I think in the semester system.
Good recovery there.
Yes.
Laser focused all the way, right?
Absolutely.
This person asked why the emergency text notification system is being used to send out timely warnings. If there is no immediate danger, this is something that has already occurred, then they feel that many people have unsubscribed because they're reading old news as opposed to being warned about something that could affect them. Is there any thoughts there?
Yeah, there are thoughts there. In response to the crisis that washed over this university with its roots in November 2011, and the Department of Education immediately informing the institution within days that they would be launching a significant Clery compliance review of the university. I think the university felt it had to take very immediate and difficult steps to tighten up its Clery compliance, including our issuance of what we know as timely warnings. It's possible that in that tightening process in the aftermath of 2011, we ratcheted too far in our efforts. We will be taking a look at our particular implementation of timely warnings. I do think we can all acknowledge that if we're besieged by those warnings, they begin to fall on deaf ears. And then people tune out to them and could potentially miss something that really does deserve or merit their attention. So we will be looking as a leadership team at the right frequency of timely warnings. Obviously, we're sitting in waiting mode for the Clery report to be issued by the U.S. Department of Education, which could come to us at any time. And we will probably wait until we do get that final report before we would proceed to make any adjustments in our timely warning system. But please know that it is something that we will consider making adaptations to.
But we are obligated to provide timely warnings.
It's a legal obligation.
The two words are both open to interpretation. What is timely and what is a warning? And I think many of you have probably seen some of the interesting ones that purport to be timely, but it was indeed an event that happened 3 weeks ago. And the warning itself contains very little information or very little actionable information. I think we in an abundance of caution, have made a strategic decision that we will issue these warnings whenever we're made aware, even if it is 2 or 3 weeks later, and that may seem of marginal utility, in part because it keeps the issue on people's radar screen. Second, we issue a template that provides all information that we have, even if that in some of the categories, the information is none or no information. But we made a strategic decision also to fully populate that template. So in part, when you get one and you look at it, you can scan and you see the same thing every time. You don't see one that's this short one time and this long the next time, but it always looks the same, even if some of the fields are empty or null. Those were just decisions that we made at the management level, but as David said, we're always looking for ways to sharpen this up because we want to convey timely information, not non-timely, non-information. So it's something that we do pay a lot of attention to.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions from the audience that we're going to get to, and this person asked, with the rising cost in health, and we need to have a healthier workforce that will drive down those costs. Are there any discussions about having free athletic facilities for staff and faculty so that would again go back to those healthy lifestyle choices?
Can I take that one?
Sure, go ahead.
Answer this one 2 ways. First, it is many of our recreational facilities on campus are paid for in large part by student fees, and so they are prioritized for student use. I mean, they are, I think, available for faculty and staff as well. If you can find a machine, because they're often pretty heavily populated by our students unless you go at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30, whatever the opening time is. We actually do have a program, and we've been asked this question or a similar question in years past. We actually do have a program that you can sign up. If you go through the benefits website, you can find it for a $25 entry fee and then a $25 monthly fee. You join not a health club, but a consortium of health clubs. And so, for example, I have my own gym. I go to Anytime Fitness. Happy to see any of you there at 5 o'clock in the morning if you want to join me. But I have been paying a membership just for that club. But for $25 a month, I can join a consortium which includes Anytime and LA Fitness and Planet Fitness and a bunch of others, and you get sort of a universal card. So you can go to any health club, you can go to Anytime on Mondays and Planet Fitness on Tuesdays for $25 a month. That is an amazing deal, actually. So while it's not free, it really does encourage people for a very modest cost to take advantage of athletic facilities in town. And that's also good for our local community as well, because it drives some of that business into those clubs and keeps them thriving as well. So we do have a program that's not exactly what is being requested, but I think it accomplishes a lot of the same goals. So anybody who's interested, I encourage you to look up that program and sign up, and I'll see you at the gym.
And you can map it out to where each day has the right and empty machines for you.
Exactly right, yes. Yep. Or to avoid the people who make you look bad. Right.
Also, always very important. You want to be the best looking person in the gym. You have both mentioned that there is one pool of funds for GSI, healthcare cost, and SERS. And knowing that it is our desire to maintain flat tuition increases and state appropriation has been modest, what are some ideas to generate funds to tackle this issue or trend? And could some of these increases in medical costs and SERS be driven by our employees' demographics?
Let me take a piece of that, and then I'll let David chime in as well. One opportunity that, of course, comes with challenges itself is growth. And one place that we really have grown considerably as an institution in the past couple of decades is through our World Campus offerings. When we first launched the World Campus back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, it was a program that generated $2-3 million a year in revenues for the university. This year we're up north of $150 million, so that has been a phenomenal growth, and those are revenues that come back, and actually a good portion of those revenues flow back directly to the units that are participating in World Campus offerings, be they colleges here at University Park or campuses. I do think that there is room for more growth in the World Campus. I think we have been very successful as an institution because we've maintained a very strong focus on the quality of the programs and the ownership of the academic programs within our academic units. So we've been able to balance quality with that growth. So I think there are opportunities for us to grow World Campus. And that doesn't just mean having more students involved in the programs that we are offering, but there are opportunities for us to push into other areas, perhaps offer some new professional master's programs that we are not offering that could prove popular. I can tell you that the Penn State brand is an incredibly strong one, and if we stand up quality Penn State academic programs and provide access through the World Campus, people will sign up. So that is certainly a source of revenue. I think we have more opportunity at many of our campus locations to grow enrollments, and we'll be looking for opportunities to do that. And of course, another opportunity for us is through research. We are a research powerhouse as an institution already, but we have really great potential to grow our research base from the $800+ million that it is now, I believe, to well over $1 billion, and that generates a portion of those revenues can be invested in the institution and address some of these issues.
I think Nick's hit on the primary areas. Sometimes I think there are pressures on universities, including Penn State, to, again, because of the revenue squeeze that we find ourselves in, to think about other areas where we might monetize assets, or we might launch new lines of business. And the only thing that I think we need to be a little concerned about there is that we, in our zeal to uncover new treasure chests, so to speak, that we not stray too far from our core mission. And I think Nick mentioned the World Campus, and I think that's a wonderful illustration of tapping into a new vein of revenue that is exactly right down the middle of the boulevard of Penn State's core mission of instruction in using 21st century techniques to do it. And so as long as we can, I think, maintain fidelity to our core missions, and look for opportunities within those to grow our revenues and expand our offerings to new markets, then we certainly should seek all opportunities to do so, but be a little leery of straying too far afield what our reason for existence is.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one more opportunity, and that is that $800 million a year that we spend on research actually causes a whole lot of really clever stuff to be done at this institution. And much of that work actually has potential in the marketplace. And I wouldn't just say potential. In fact, I think we have an obligation as Pennsylvania's land-grant university to ensure that the fruits of that research find their way out into the community through the marketplace, so that people can really benefit from the investment that they are making in us with generally their tax dollars. Now, the way to do that is through technology licensing, technology commercialization, and as an institution, we've been a little bit sleepy about doing that in past years. President Barron's new Invent Penn State initiative, I think, really is placing much more of a focus on ensuring that the discoveries that are taking place at Penn State that can find their way into the marketplace where they do good can also benefit the university. So we're pretty optimistic that much of the investment that is taking place in that Invent Penn State initiative ultimately will long-term generate additional revenues for the university that we then can invest as we see fit.
We are coming to a close, so I wanted to thank you all for your wonderful questions, both coming in online from the people watching the live stream and from our live audience. But I did want to give you each the opportunity to send some people with some closing thoughts and what you'd like them to take home with them today.
This is, we've talked about this in previous town halls, and a lot of it has come up today. There's a lot of change going on. Some of it is self-imposed in some cases because we had to do things differently, because the way we were doing things was broken. Others because we see an opportunity to be better as an institution by doing things in a different way. And some of it is imposed externally. If I roll back the clock to when I started as a faculty member, 30 years ago now, that was, it was a completely different external environment. It was a different regulatory environment. It was a different compliance requirement. There are a lot of things that are being imposed upon us as an institution through externalities over which we have very little control, but we have an obligation nonetheless to respond. So I think we realize that we're going through a period where there's a lot of churn, and it's almost like you can't come to work a week later and not see something else that is coming at you that is causing you to rethink the way that you've gotten used to doing business. We acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that it is hard. I can assure you that we work very diligently to do our job as well as we can to ensure that these impacts on everybody are mitigated to the extent possible, are done in the best way possible. That does not mean, given the scope and content of many of these changes that you are not impacted. We know that you are. We know it's difficult. I don't want to just use the cliche that change is hard, but change is hard. We know that the vast majority of our Penn State employees are embracing this. You don't have to always embrace it smiling. You can embrace it with a frown, but you are embracing it nonetheless, and rolling up your sleeves and doing what is necessary to make this work. And I can tell you that your commitment to this institution and your commitment to helping navigate through these rather turbulent periods as we make many of these changes that we need to make is deeply appreciated at all levels of the university, certainly from David and me. I know from Eric, if he were here, he would be saying the same thing, but all of us in leadership. And ultimately, even though they may complain to you from time to time, our students and the other constituents we serve appreciate your commitment to continuing to make Penn State an even greater institution than it is now. So thank you for everything that you do for our great institution.
In terms of a parting thought, I would ask all of you to remember one of those 5 of our new Penn State values that I happen to think is most elemental. They're all important, obviously, but the one that I think speaks to me most deeply is respect. If, as a community, faculty, staff, and students, we have respect for one another, we will by definition be an inclusive environment. We will be colleagues that communicate openly and robustly, respectfully, politely, with civility with one another. And we will begin to see some lowering of tensions. If we all respect one another as human beings and as members of this community, we will see the subsidence of sexual assault and other forms of assault, harassment, and intimidation. So as a parting thought, I would ask you to consider very seriously that new Penn State value of respect. It should speak very loudly to all of us, I think. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for attending today, and not just attending, but to participating in this event. And this town hall will be archived on the web, and the URL will be publicized, so watch for the story that's going to be in tomorrow's edition of Penn State Today. That's on Thursday. And we're always looking into ways to improve these town halls. So if you would, we'd ask you to please complete our survey that we've prepared for this. And the URL is at tinyurl.com, PSU Town Hall, September 2016. Again, that's tinyurl.com/PSU Town Hall, September 2016. That link will be in the story tomorrow in Penn State Today, so you don't have to memorize it. But I'll say it a third time because 3 times helps. tinyurl.com/PSU Town Hall, September 2016. Again, thank you so much for attending. The next town hall is scheduled for October 26th. This one is going to be in the Hub. It will also be live streamed, and we will be releasing more information about that in the coming weeks. Thank you all for your interest in Penn State. Thank you, Nick Jones and David Gray, for taking time out of your day to answer these questions. Everyone, have a good day and be safe.
Thank you.